the need for open discussions on YouTube and the internet in general. Hey, it's Prince of Queens, and a few things today reminded me about the fact that people really do need to talk to each other when they disagree. It's very, very much true. That's been rather hard, to say the least, recently on YouTube due to various social trends. But it's kind of a shame because ultimately I love good conversation where people disagree with each other. I have 2 different live streams where I talk to people that I totally disagreed with. One of which with a young feminist that you can go check out in my live stream conversation, and one with a young Antifa guy who was black and gay that is on my live stream channel. So both the conversation on this channel with the young feminist and with the Antifa guy, I totally disagreed with the ideological position that they entered the conversation with. And by the end of it, we found a lot of common ground. Actually, the young feminist in question wrote me the next day saying that she was thinking that she was going to come up with a new label for herself, and she didn't really want to call herself a feminist anymore. But it was because I was nice to her, and it was because I exposed her to a lot of information. And it was because I was very, I would want to say, fair about actually listening to why she felt the way she did prior to talking to me, and then doing my best to learn her position and trying to kind of talk her out of it. And I've done that a lot in my life, and I do that on the internet, even, not on YouTube. I do it on all social media platforms. Aside from really Twitter, I don't really try to use Twitter to argue because I don't like the character limit. It just doesn't really work very much. I've been sucked into arguing on Twitter, and it's always been a mistake. So, but I will get into really, really long Facebook conversations with people to try to get through to them, and it's great, honestly, to sometimes be able to actually change hearts and minds. And I wish that more of that happened in general. I want people to remember that the internet is real. It is possible to have real conversations, and internet conversations are super, super important because despite what a lot of people would think, real changing of people's viewpoints can definitely happen on the internet. And actually, in my view, most of the time that I've really changed my own positions have been as a result of internet conversations. Because when you're on the internet, you are intellectually engaged with whatever you're talking about. Because if you weren't interested in talking about that subject, you wouldn't be talking about it. You'd be watching cat videos or something. So that means that your mind is on that. If you're at Thanksgiving and your relative is talking about politics, you don't necessarily want to hear it. You'd probably rather talk about some other thing. And so when people dismiss the importance of internet conversating, they are being kind of silly, because when are people more receptive to learning new things than when they are online, actively engaged? That all said, things have not been going super well recently in many spheres. This guy wrote me a private message recently as a result of my interview on Honey Badger Radio, my fireside chat with Brian. And to be perfectly truthful, he seems like he's probably a fairly interesting guy, this guy who wrote me. I don't have a problem with his views at all. He seems to be a gay guy who writes a blog, and he wanted to talk about a very specific thing that was mentioned between Brian and I. It was a very short little thing that Brian brought up, and I agreed with. I said, yeah, I think that's true, basically. And this guy had written a blog article about how that's apparently not true, what Brian had said, or something like that. So he wrote me kind of a semi-confrontational message. I think he said first that he enjoyed my appearance, and then he said something trying to correct me, and I said, oh, okay, maybe that's true, and I don't remember exactly what I said, but I was pretty nice about it, I think. And then he wrote me a response to what I said. I legitimately said that maybe I was slightly wrong about something, or maybe I phrased something badly and there was confusion, and I acted very open to hearing his perspective, and he was rude about it, and he acted like I was being annoying and that I should be reading his blog, and it got very, very weird. And so it made me think about the general protocol of how people should approach people on the internet that they disagree with for conversations. This guy even went on to try to say something about me and my positions. Like, he was like, oh, yeah, you gay right-wing anti-feminists are quite annoying, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, I'm not even right-wing. I don't define as right-wing, and I don't define as an anti-feminist. I wouldn't define as an anti-feminist any more than I define as an anti-Christian. I'm opposed to the feminist ideology in the way that I think it's completely inaccurate on basically every level, but I'm not an anti-feminist. And I figured if, maybe he watched my channel a little bit more, he might know that about me. So I came up with some guidelines regarding how people should discuss oppositional viewpoints with each other on the internet if they expect it to happen in a constructive way or even happen at all. These are things that would be true for me. If you ever would want to have a disagreement with me about something, I would appreciate that you stick to these guidelines, and I think most people would actually probably appreciate it. So I have about 5, and I'm going to elaborate on them a bit. First, you need to make it clear that you actually understand my positions and that you are not misrepresenting them. And if you purposefully misrepresent my position, I will not talk to you. Period. Because you've proven already that you're not somebody that is interested in what I actually think. You're interested in putting words in my mouth. So there's no purpose in talking to you, because when you represent what I actually said, you're just going to make things up anyway. So why don't I just ignore the concept of talking to you entirely, right? Okay, guideline number 2. You need to prove that you are reputable and show that you aren't somebody that flat out lies about people frequently. Telling the truth on the internet is actually really important to me. So that goes beyond just, what I'm actually saying at any given time. If you are somebody that makes stuff up about other people, it's okay to get things wrong, but if you just are totally willing to say weird rumors or things that I know aren't true, then I have a problem with you, and I won't talk to you. And that's just me, but, there might be a reason for me to somehow confront one of these people on occasion, but for the most part, I don't want to interact with liars. I think that they should be socially shunned on the internet, because lies can actually wreak a lot of havoc. We all know about what happened with Mattress Girl, In the information age, lying is a worse crime than sending a threat, or, it's about the worst thing that somebody can do, arguably, besides doxing. Lying is really, really bad on the internet, so don't be a liar on the internet. I won't want anything to do with you if you are knowingly lying, and it becomes clear that you do that. Guideline number 3. You need to be willing to at least be somewhat consistent with your own views and what you are trying to get across. This means that you can't just be arguing for argument's sake, but you should be arguing with the intention of being persuasive or maybe learning something. So I don't need you to necessarily change your viewpoint and compromise, because if you're right about something, then you're right about something. But if you're talking to me and you think I'm wrong about something, you should be hoping to try to convince me. And then if you do convince me, that should be that. Right? That should be the purpose. It shouldn't be anything more than that. You shouldn't be coming up with some new thing that you disagree about so that you can keep the argument going, because I have no interest in that. Because I'm willing to make compromises. I've taken down entire videos because there were things that I've gotten wrong in them. And I've evolved my opinions on YouTube a lot. Like, if you go through my old videos compared to my new videos, you can tell that I've grown massively, and I'm always changing my opinions. I have no problem doing that. And often it's because of comments I get sometimes. So, you know, I like to think I'm a pretty reasonable guy in that way, and I think that there's a lot of people who are totally willing to evolve their opinions. But if you aren't even interested in trying to coerce people and instead are just interested in the banter and keeping that going, I don't have any real reason to talk to you, because there are people who are interested in changing my mind. The guy who wrote me today, he was interested in changing my mind. He had stuff to say. He wrote a blog. He wanted me to read his blog. And that's cool. I can respect that. But, you know, he wasn't pleasant about it. You know, he didn't understand my views. So it was unfortunate because it made me really not want to interact with him. Okay, next guideline. You don't have to. You don't necessarily need to be super nice. I've changed my opinion before, largely on account of the fact that something I said really upset somebody, and I realized that they had a good reason to be upset. So what I'm saying is this: I don't want you to not be passionate if you're passionate. Passion is honestly a good emotion in many, many ways. It's actually effective and it gets things done. So I don't want you to compromise your passion if you're legitimately passionate. I don't want you to manufacture your passion. I think that that's tacky. But you are allowed to be passionate as long as you have integrity, as long as you're not making stuff up or pinning something on me that isn't true. Okay? And finally, the last guideline I have is make any discussion in a neutral setting. Don't have any surprise guests on a live stream. Don't read negative comments making fun of your guests. Instead, you should just use your own arguments to debate. Don't gang up on people. If you're in a Facebook comment thread, don't tag like a bunch of your friends to come dogpile somebody. Just use your own head. If you need the perspective of someone else, like if you're talking about some other person, you can ask if you want to bring that person on potentially, but sometimes you don't have to bring that person on. You can say, no, this is what I remember about that person, and that can be that. You know, if you agreed to an argument or debate or whatever with one person, you can have your debate with that one person, not with you and whoever shows up in your chat who wants to try to also argue, and you decide to, you know, say, look at all these people in the chat who think you're dumb. That's not constructive. If you do that, people won't want to stream with you. So yeah, that's a lot of guidelines. If you have to follow those guidelines, you do have to, I don't know, think about a few things and use your head. Sure. And you don't have to follow those rules. But if you want people to be willing to talk to you who have disagreements with you, chances are if you go by those guidelines, a lot more people will be willing to talk to you. And if you want to have debates, these are good things to go by. That's just my recommendation. You can do what you want.